Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Now, it is 100% a pet peeve of mine to call something a playoff-style win. Because what does that mean? What exactly does that weird hodgepodge of words actually put together? Well, when it comes to the National Hockey League, it generally means there was a whole bunch of penalties, people mauled each other just for fun all across the ice, and some type of gritty, difficult victory was pulled from the sure jaws of defeat. And only some of those things happened this evening as the Edmonton Oilers come away with a 1-0 win. Stuart Skinner moves to a perfect 9-0 after a loss as he picks up the shutout, the words we were so afraid to say all game long, as the Los Angeles Kings resume their rightful place as losers against your oily boys of Edmonton. How are you, frienda? Welcome to Game Over Edmonton. I'm Graham Mosimann. Very excited to be back here in the host chair for this one. I haven't been able to do one of these games in such a long time. I started a new job. It takes up a lot of time and brain space, and so there's literally some days where I haven't had the energy to watch hockey, but being able to actually sit down, eat some shawarma, and enjoy what was ultimately a very, very gritty, very, at times, quite difficult win for the Edmonton Oilers. The goaltending battle between Darcy Kemper and Stuart Skinner was a highlight of this particular game. McDavid pulling away with the goal on his birthday, and the Oilers once again with the worst sense of sealing the game away I have ever seen from a hockey team. I don't know why this team is so terrible at putting in empty net goals. I will never understand it, but hey, you know what? It's fine. They got the win ultimately, and isn't that what's most important? We'll dive into it all today here on this episode of Game Over Edmonton. If you have thoughts, feelings, emotions, you want to put them in the chat, please do. We'll get to your thoughts on tonight's game through the entirety of this little post-game show. Anything that you want to get off your chest, please throw it up in there, and we will discuss. We're going to break this game down pretty simply, period by period, here over on Game Over Edmonton. We are going to... The first period was weird. I didn't super love the effort that the Oilers put forward when this game got started. Maybe you have different emotions. Would love to find out what you think. Before we get into that, though, I want to tell you all about Hyperdrive Hockey. Yeah, that show is back, baby, where it is going to be your best news source for all the biggest stories in hockey, with a unique style of broadcasting and commentary with a distinctly Quebecois flavor, because that is Hyperdrive Hockey, the flagship podcast here on the Game Over Network. It combines top-tier hockey analysis, big stories, pop culture, and gosh darn it, just a fun atmosphere that will help drive debate, make you think, and more. Max Van Hoot, Daphne Malmuth, and Kevin Larmé every Tuesday and Friday will have new episodes getting you up to date on everything in the hockey world. It's really exciting, really fun. They have a brand new episode that is coming out tomorrow, so you can find that over on the YouTube for the Game Over Network National Channel, or subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon. You can hit up thegameovernetwork.com for more information. Now, let's dive into the first period of this particular game, because I think it was kind of a weird one, as the Los Angeles Kings very much kind of held the balance of power in the first part of the game. And if it wasn't for Stuart Skinner, this game would not have gone the way that it did. Some couple shots, really, really sharp ones early from the likes of Adrian Kempe. Warren Fogle, former Edmonton Oiler, had some really nice moments as well for the Kings, and could have absolutely, extremely easily put this one away as the LA Kings really kind of overwhelmed the Oilers and didn't give them a whole lot of room and space, and kind of played the exact kind of game that the LA Kings have to if they want to keep up with this team. Because let's face it, when we're talking pure offensive powerhouse talent, who do the Kings have that makes them good and able to be in the place they are in the standings right now? You got Adrian Kempe, who rocks, regular 40-goal scorer, one of the quietest 40-goal scorers in the league. The somewhat ageless Anze Kopitar from the great nation of Slovenia, and one-time captain of the famed Team Europe in the World Cup of Hockey. If you remember that very odd little tournament from a number of years ago. And the Kevin Fiala, who's very up or down as the player goes, and then Warren Foegele, who's put out a really, really, really nice season for the Kings, signing a deal there in the offseason. So you compare that to what the Oilers have, they're just not in the same stratosphere at all. So what do you have to do if you're the Kings to be able to keep up with the Oilers? Well, you do the exact things that you were doing all in the first period. You play a very smothering, very physical type of defense. You clog up the zone. You make it very mushy and gross, like the La Brea tar pits, to keep the Oilers from being able to get up to full speed. The trouble is when you are a team and that's your method for slowing down the Oilers, you only have so long before your players will literally get too tired to keep up. And I think you started to see that coming up in the second period. As you get into about 15 minutes into the first, that's when the Oilers started to pick up their level of play and push back a bit. Because for the first 15 minutes of this game, the Oilers only had 2 shots on goal, and they were absolute muffins. However, Kings start to slow down. The Oilers able to play the game that they know and succeed at very, very well. And eventually it was going to start to even out. And I think you started to see that as you push your way through the first period. So Oilers, I think all in all, were probably fairly lucky and can really thank Stuart Skinner for keeping them in the game up to that point. Because if he hadn't kept it together, the Oilers they would not have pulled out this particular win. I think if the Kings get a couple goals early, you can probably cement this one away. However, we don't get there. And Stuart Skinner proves once again why it was probably a mistake to leave him off the Team Canada roster at the Four Nations face-off. But I mean, the goalies for Team Canada, there's a million things you could say about that one. So we'll definitely have some very fun Four Nations face-off coverage that we'll dive into more when that tournament officially gets going in just a handful of weeks. But we're going to kind of put a pin. That'll wrap up the first period for this team. Oilers have a couple okay chances, but ultimately kind of using this moment to kind of seal up the balance of play and start tilting the ball and it's tilting the ice back towards the Los Angeles Kings, because it was very much in the second period where this team really started to kind of figure it out and ultimately pulled ahead. So before we dive into the second period of this little hockey game that we all so much enjoyed from Ice District here in beautiful Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, I need to tell you again, go get Hyperdrive Hockey. Download that show. It rocks. I know we love our little media bubbles. We love the podcasts we get into, and trying something new is hard and scary and weird, but that's okay, because gosh darn it, I believe in you to try something new and really enjoy something. And that show is Hyperdrive Hockey. So go subscribe and we'll have a new episode for you very, very, very soon. We pop over the chat as we get ready to dive into our second period today. Will Gallo, thank the Lord for Stu and his Batman Levels of Vengeance game. Will, that is such a really good point. Is when it comes to someone who feels, I would assume, just an unbridled sense of rage hidden behind a handsome, beefy mustache, you can only assume it's Stuart Skinner, because like we discussed at the very start of this game, every time he has a loss, he comes back with something awesome, invariably, and it puts him on a good little streak for the next handful of games. And once Stuart Skinner really kind of got settled after withstanding that barrage in the first period, he kind of became the guy that we know and we know can perform at a very high level with, however, some of that kind of inconsistency. And I will say, I don't think this is like a super spicy take or anything, but genuinely, I am so grateful that for every great Stuart Skinner game we have like tonight, that invariably in a couple of weeks there's going to be a game where he goes from being Stuart Skinner and he's going to turn into Armin Tamzarian, someone that none of us like at all. That was a bad episode of The Simpsons. Armin Tamzarian, such garbage. Invariably, Stuart Skinner is going to have a bad butthole of a game coming up in just a few weeks. And you know what? You know what all that's going to do? All that's going to do is lower his number to re-sign him in the long term. Because that's one thing about Stuart Skinner that I think we kind of forget. Remember, once upon a time, he was supposed to be like the third string goalie behind some combination of Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith. Like, that's how long Stuart Skinner has been in the NHL. Is when you had an injury to Mikko and Mike Smith was firing pucks up the board like he was like he's shooting rockets up into the air. This analogy really went stupid, and I can't put it together in a way that won't end up actually making someone sad or upset. You have Mike Smith just firing muffins up into the world, and Mikko Koskinen was hurt. That's when we started to see the early phases of Stuart Skinner. And the third shutout, Janice McKay, wow, Stu, the third shutout. We absolutely love this. We do. But we also love the fact that in a few games, he's going to suck again. And all that's going to do is lower that number. All it's going to do is going to lower that number for re-signing him. Because Stuart Skinner right now, as we head over to the old Google machine, because I can't remember how old he is off the top of my head. He is 26 years old. This man was born in 1998. And he's right at that place at 26 years old where goaltenders really firmly kind of become, for the most part, the player that they're going to be. And when he's already had a couple big playoff runs to his name, and especially last year going all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, this man is going to be due for an absolutely mega contract if it wasn't for these butthole games that he gets once in a while. So if Stu wants to have a couple more of those and sets us up so Jeff Jackson and company can sign him to a long-term deal at a lower cap hit, I won't be upset. Janaeus brings up again here in the chat. So Stu beats Boston 4-0, played the next game and lost 5-3. I feel like Picard should be the start next versus Minnesota, and then Stu by the Avs. I don't want to look like too intently at the kind of back and forth, Janice, but I think you may be right on that one. I mean, this is one of my favorite things about Calvin Pickard, because this guy was very much signed to be the third string depth option, and because Jack Campbell turned into a bag of curling rocks at some point in his career, it's so nice to see that him and Stu have this great relationship where Picard he seems very comfortable and okay with the fact that, yep, I'm a backup and that's my space here. So when you have that great relationship between two players, I think it's okay to give Picard a couple more starts. Although I don't, Minnesota is such a good team and they're playing still so well that I worry about putting him in. Because there's a chance we could get kind of shelled, especially when Edmonton, we've had not awesome showings against the Minnesota Wild over the year. Stu is an Edmontonian at heart, born and raised. He don't care about money. He's got real passion, and you have real passion. Janaeus McKay in the chat. Happy to have you here, friendo. If you have any thoughts, feelings, emotions, by the way, please throw them up in the chat. We'll get to them throughout the show here, which is very much kind of turning into a very understandable and fair Stuart Skinner love fest, which it kind of absolutely should be, as he pulls up another shutout on the season. Although we did see this tweet cross the timeline that sure, Stuart Skinner gets a shutout tonight. 9-0 after a loss is cool, but Connor Hellebuck still has as many shutouts as he has losses. Okay, fine. Bug off with that, you nerd. I get it. Connor Hellebuck rocks, and he should probably win the Hart Trophy this year, except for the fact that the NHL is stupid and goalies are only allowed to win the Vezina and not the Hart because reasons or whatever. Stupid. That's something, though, for our pals over at Game Over Winnipeg to dive into. And I'm sure we'll get into it when we have our next crossover, when these two teams next face off. So, as we kind of get into the second period here, this was when the Oilers really kind of turned everything around and were able to pull this out, because it very much kind of seemed like the Los Angeles Kings ran out of steam. The smothering, overwhelming, dragging the Oilers into the mud type of game that they needed to play to continue to win just wasn't going to happen. And they had a couple nice shots and some really interesting opportunities, but they just were not able to capitalize on them, as Stuart Skinner stood very tall again. You had some really nice defensive moments, and including a couple of weird runs by Darnell Nurse. Interesting game tonight for Darnell Nurse. I mean, you got a shutout, so you can't critique the Oilers' defense too much. Like, shutouts don't happen unless the goaltender and the defense are playing well at the same time. That's not how the league works. So, mostly really good moments from Darnell Nurse tonight. I really loved Emberson's game. He is someone that I'm so happy to see has very much kind of morphed into this player that people thought he was going to be when we traded for him and had to sacrifice our sweet boy Hugo Cece's dad, Cody, to be able to bring in. So really, really great to see him play super well. But when the Oilers really started to kind of take over this team, or take over this game, you had the Connor McDavid goal, which was just a really nice moment where you can just see how well this team performs together and how in tune they are with one another. And stuff like that only happens when you have teams that innately know one another and are able to have so much chemistry that they just are able to make those beautiful kind of tic-tac-toe moments when a play has fallen apart to cement in a goal. And that's exactly what we saw this evening, as Connor McDavid ends up pulling in his goal with assists on the play to Darnell Nurse and then Leon Draisaitl. Leon Draisaitl, unfortunately, just because he is, some will say, second fiddle, the Evgeny Malkin to Connor's Sidney Crosby. He probably won't get as much love for the Hart Trophy as he probably should. I know, yes, he has won one before, which is obscene to say. Like, if you're depending on what kind of age of Oilers fan you are, like my formative Oilers years were very much with those 06, the kind of 06 Cup run was the pinnacle, when our greatest, most incredible offensive player was Ales Hemsky, who maybe had 22 to 24 goals a season and maybe 30 assists. We were like, wow, that's amazing. To now have two players that are legitimately Hart Trophy contenders every year is very, very cool. But Leon Draisaitl's case for the Hart, I think, cannot be understated, as he continues to just help this team in every single way that you possibly can. And his defensive game is absolutely also not getting enough love. His face-off ability has been mega for this team all year. The scoring we could talk about forever is he has a chance to get a Rocket Richard very possibly this year. It's incredible to think that when this guy was drafted, you had so many folks saying, yeah, he's pretty good. He's a little slow. His skating's not great, but at the highest tippy top of his level, he could be he could maybe be on Anze Kopitar, maybe, and now you can very much argue that he's surpassed that, and his level of skill is much more on par with a Nikita Kucherov, a Nate McKinnon, an all-time not quite generational, but an all-time Hall of Fame talent. So is Anze Kopitar, but they're just very, very different types of players. Anze Kopitar, But absolutely blows me away that that player is as old as he is. And again, it's old is very very relative. I mean, he's 37 years old, a very young man in terms of the whole world thing. But in terms of hockey, he's basically dead. Shocking, he can even skate at all. And Anze Kopitar just year after year after year after year puts together incredible performances, and I think you could probably argue that aside from Wayne Gretzky, he's the greatest LA King of all time. And if Dustin Brown has gotten a statue outside Crypto.com Arena, whatever its stupid name is now, he should absolutely deserve one, because there was a few moments where he almost was able to pull this game back within to tying it for the Kings, and just had another really quality performance. So that'll kind of wrap up the second period here for Game Over Edmonton. Before we get into the third, I do want to tell you about our Patreon. So our Patreon is really really important. We're a very very tiny company, and you can be a big part in kind of helping us out and helping create more content and hire more people with more diverse backgrounds and more different voices. So we are employing over 30 young journalists and analysts all across Canada, and if you have just a couple bucks, you can head over to our Patreon page and make an absolutely life-changing difference in all of these peoples. You'll find multiple tiers and different rewards and goodies for helping us grow with Patreon. We have extra access, exclusive behind-the-scene looks, Discord benefits, merch discounts. You can give us special feedback. You can join us for special shows, live interactive shows. We're launching some very, very cool things up coming through this season that I think you're really going to love. That will be super fun to be a part of. So if you have a few bucks kicking around for the Patreon, that would mean the world if you would kind of give us and help us out and help the Game Over Network become a bigger voice here in the world of Canadian media. If you're not able to spare a few dollars, we do have a free tier available, so you don't miss out. If the easiest way you can honestly help us is with a like, a subscribe, we're giving us a rating on your favorite podcast app, and then sharing our work on whatever social media platform you have. So you can find all our stuff there at patreon.com/the Game Over Network for a whole bunch of very cool stuff. As we roll into our third period of tonight's analysis, Janaeus McKay, fantastic commentary. Thank you so much, my friend. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us here on Game Over Edmonton. And it is the perfect night. Janaeus says once again, McDavid gets his birthday goal. And he should have had a second birthday goal, but gosh darn it, that man has what is the opposite of killer instinct when it comes to empty net goals? Healing instinct, loving instinct. It's so weird. I don't understand what it is about this hockey team, but that is one of the things we're going to dive into with the third period of tonight's game. So Connor McDavid, happy birthday, 28 years old, picks up another goal to add to his incredible total. I think you really, really started to notice at about the 45-minute-ish mark here that the LA Kings were kind of out of gas. They just simply do not have the horses to keep up with the Oilers, and you could really see the Oilers put on a full court press to push this team into the loss category. Now, I want to give full credit to some really great Kings young players, including Jordan Spence, who, man, that he is. There's like those players that, because I don't watch a lot of Kings games. I don't know if you do, but you see the players with names you don't necessarily recognize as much and go, holy crap, that guy's really good. Jordan Spence, very, very much on that list. Brent Clark as well had some absolutely phenomenal moments. Without a Drew Doughty, who says he's going to come back for the Four Nations face-off, which I don't quite believe. We'll see how it all shakes out. I got to say, the defense of the LA Kings has been absolutely unreal. Mikey Anderson, a huge, huge part of that. I know Mikey Anderson very much still isn't deservedly as a villain in the city, given the hack job that he performed on Leon Draisaitl's ankle from a number of playoff series ago. But you got to give the Kings defense a lot of kudos, because they, especially under Jim Hiller this year. They play a very, very structured game. They play a very deliberate game, and they do an awesome job at gumming up the works in ways that don't put them out of position. Because you'll see this a lot when the Oilers start to play what I call floundering defense, is they almost get like a little bit too excited, and they'll lunge out and they'll kind of dive and they'll push and they'll overexert themselves and end up out of position for teams to take advantage and score. It's like if Tim Thomas was a defenseman, but a whole crew of them and all on the ice at the same time, just a bunch of MAGA chuds skating around being goobers, flip flopping. The Kings are the very, very opposite. They play defense like Cam Talbot plays goaltender, very, very steady, very focused, very concentrated and efficient with how they play, which is really cool to see given how many young players that are on that defense core. But the Oilers' depth in scoring, the depth in offense, and just playmaking ability really kind of pushes them out. And the Kings really did have a little bit of a pushback later in the period as you saw them start to kind of get things going within the last 5 minutes or so. Philip Deneau, who, cards on the table, I completely forgot was a King after he had his incredible one run with Montreal, signs over in Los Angeles. I think he put it together a 5-year deal. Completely forgot he was on that team. Which is crazy to think, given how often he was heralded as this incredible defensive wizard that could shut down anyone. He had a nice little chance on goal, ultimately not able to put it through. I was surprised at how late Jim Hiller took his timeout. There was only about 90 seconds left in the game before he took his timeout and kind of really scoped out a plan, despite having a few options earlier to put a timeout in and pull Darcy Kemper. And Darcy Kemper, I want to read you some of the numbers for Darcy Kemper this year, because he has been absolutely phenomenal since being the kind of focal point in that trade that sent Pierre-Luc Dubois from the Kings to Washington, where PLD is now just crushing. So over 20 games this season, Darcy Kemper has 12 wins, 2 shutouts, a 2.16 goals against average, and a .921 save percentage. Should he have perhaps been named to the Team Canada's roster for the Four Nation Faceoff ahead of Jordan Binnington, who was just going to punch holes in the wall for fun? Very probably. But hey, it's Hockey Canada. We all know they're hilariously bad at their job. So full marks to Darcy Kemper, who is able to kind of keep them in on this one. Although Jim Hiller absolutely left him in the net for way too long. And then we get to the point where Kemper is pulled. The Oilers have multiple chances to ice this game away. And I love the stat that Louis brought out right at the end of the broadcast, where the Colorado Avalanche have 19 empty net goals on this season. A bunch of those, of course, by Nathan MacKinnon, who I'm almost convinced that man turns, when you give that man a chance to score on an empty net, he goes from being just like this kind of cute, silly little fun guy from Nova Scotia to a feral beast monster who's just must score, like Bilbo Baggins when he sees the ring in Rivendell at the end of the Fellowship before they go off to the mines of Moria. He goes nuts for every possible empty net goal he can get, and the Oilers don't have a single player like that, which is infuriating. Connor McDavid had a chance. You could tell he kind of threw that as a muffin. He has all the skill and all the talent in the world. The dude just doesn't give a hoot about scoring empty net goals. Even when he had a wide open net with 20 seconds left right at the end, he takes it and passes it across to Leon Draisaitl, which, okay, cool. That's a nice little fun friend move for you to do. Love that. But score the goal. Come on. You fired a pass across to Leon, who I don't think expected the pass. He tries to score, and then it goes to hell. Even Zach Hyman tries to come in and score on on another empty net goal, and just nothing happens. As this has just been the year for Zach Hyman, just with the weirdest and worst luck that he's gotten compared to what he had the last couple seasons. There was something about the Oilers in not having the killer instinct I would really wish they would have when it comes to an empty net goal. Now, it hasn't bitten them a ton, but I do get concerned when we get to the playoffs that when you have a chance to cement teams away, whether we end up playing the Kings again like we probably will, or a Vancouver, or hell, even a Calgary, because they could actually make it. You watch the Calgary Flames, and I hate commenting and hate giving this team so much credit. You watch them go after an empty net puck, it's like that is their last morsel of food that they'll see for a week, because they want to score on that empty net so bad to ice the game away. The Oilers don't have that. I don't know why. Is maybe Chris Knobloch just too relaxed and too chill? Maybe. But, come on. 6 empty net goals in the season when you're this good of a hockey team? Get out of here. Score more. Get the empty net goal. Put the other teams to bed. We have one more segment here on Game Over Edmonton. And it's all about you. You have your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, anything you want to get off your chest about this game. Please post it in the chat or send it to us on Twitter. Send it to me on Twitter right now, at Graham Mosimann. Would love to dive into any questions you have or things that you want to know. Will Gallo, I just saw your question pop up. Gosh darn it, we're going to get to that one because I love where your head's at, and we're definitely going to jump into it. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you about some very cool stuff that we have here on Hyperdrive Hockey. We have merch, not Hyperdrive Hockey. That's our show. That's the podcast show. Game Over Network, we have merch. So if you like the show, you like what we're doing, and want to wear it on your little meat suit, the Game Over Network, we have an apparel line with 3 unique lines. We got a retro kind of skater design, a very established kind of robot design, or you can show your love for the tendies with your live and die by the goalie design. If you just need another coffee mug or a toque to get you through the winter, we have all of that on our merch store, designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Hop your way over to GameOverNetwork.com. You can find all of our merch, a whole bunch of different items, and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada, while also repping your community. So in overtime, we field questions. We get into your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions on this game. Do you think that Jeff Skinner could get moved? This coming from Will Gallo. I can see him getting at least PP 2 minutes for a few games to gauge interest pre-deadline. Feels like the Blue Jackets might be interested in his situation. Oh, man, the Jeff Skinner question. Jeff Skinner is such a frustrating kind of enigma as a player. You just look at his straight up pure stats. We're not going to look at where he's been playing situationally. We're not going to look at any of his defensive metrics. Let's just look at his overall performance this season. It hasn't been awesome, let's face it. He hasn't performed well in many, many, many zones. And this year, so far, as he does not get in tonight's game, he has 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points on the year. It's not good when you're making $3 million, especially on this particular team. And I know this is an imperfect stat, but the -10 absolutely screams off the page here. Jeff Skinner, I think you can argue this is probably the worst year he's had of his career since the 2020-2021 season, where he played 53 games and only put in 14 points. That was the COVID year. He was all over the place with the Sabres. He didn't feel like he had a good role. How do we do something with this player at $3 million? The short answer is it's all really up to Jeff Skinner. If Jeff Skinner decides he wants a change of pace, he can waive his no-trade clause. I want to say I think he could get moved. I would love to say that we could send him off somewhere to get something in return. I honestly don't know if you can, though, if he just doesn't want to move. Because, let's face it, he's got his money. His family, I'm assuming, lives with him here for the year. And he really controls his own destiny. So, even if you put him on the power play 2 and hope you get something, the power play 2 still just doesn't have enough horses on it for him to really kind of perform. We've seen that all year long. You put him anywhere in this lineup, even though he's been an incredibly consistent 5-on-5 scorer, it hasn't panned out here. And you can really tell that Chris Knobloch just straight up does not trust the guy at all in any defensive situation. He pulls a -1 in that game against Pittsburgh. For the game against Boston last Tuesday, a game that the Oilers just kicked all the ass in, he was only a +1. And I know plus-minus is an imperfect sack, but I think that's really telling with what you can get from Jeff Skinner. I really wonder if his hockey, he's not fast. He's a quick skater. He's not particularly fast. He thinks the game well, but he's always just feels slightly off. I mean, he's on an absolute toilet run of a PDO, so his hockey luck stats are pretty terrible. I wonder if you can. I feel like the only way you can move him, Will, is if you move him for another reclamation project and kind of hope for the best. I fully admit this is me being a dumb, stupid Oilers fan that lived through the decade of darkness. I know Taylor Hall sucks this year. I know he's been brutal. He's been injury prone. He is not as fast as he used to be. He does not score like he used to be. And he's not going to be long for staying with the Chicago Blackhawks. It's extremely likely that the Blackhawks move off of Taylor Hall this season. He is, however, performing better than Jeff Skinner with 8 goals and 14 points for 22 on the year in fewer games. If you can throw in something to the Blackhawks, a little bit extra to say, hey, we have a guy that's not working here. You have a guy that's not working here. Let's do a quick swap. You just got to hang on to half of his salary, so they're the exact same number. If you can throw in something for Chicago to retain half of Taylor Hall, and then you bring in Taylor Hall to potentially play with the same player that helped him win the Hart Trophy when he was with New Jersey all those years ago, repairing up him and Adam Henrique, can you hope for some old magic to respark? It's a long shot. These players are much older than they were when Taylor Hall won his Hart Trophy, but that's a situation I could see maybe you can get something different for Jeff Skinner. Honestly, I think we're kind of stuck with the guy. We're probably going to go to the playoffs with him, and he's probably going to get scratched a bunch, unfortunately. One more roster question from Will. Do you think there's any urgency from Bowman on adding a D pre-Four Nations? Emberson has been really nice to watch on the PK, but maybe a guy can QB power play 2 and rest Ekholm. Will, I think having you've mentioned power play 2 a couple times. The Oilers' second power play unit, I honestly think you can almost like write it off. It doesn't really exist. It's all about those first few folks. I think you can see it. I don't think it'll really happen. There won't be a huge effect like you kind of want it to be. I think having someone who can rest Matthias Ekholm is almost more important, and having a puck mover, especially a right-hand shot that can move Emberson down and let you kind of rejig the right side a little bit, I think would be pretty huge. I was reading something from Julian McKenzie the other day where he talked about specifically there's this almost like pre-deadline before the Four Nations, because you have so many players that are going to be going on vacation for that tournament, and you want to get the trades done before that. I would prefer if Stan Bowman does that. To be honest, I think the more time you have a player to settle in, the better. We have seen when you pick up defensemen at the deadline, very rarely does it work out super, super well. I'm trying to think of the last time adding a defenseman strictly for a playoff run worked out awesomely. I want to say it was maybe Yaroslav Spacek a bajillion years ago. I don't even remember if that was a trade deadline. Oh boy. No, it wasn't. That was a trade in January 2006 where the Blackhawks traded Spacek to the Oilers in exchange for, wow, I forgot this man existed, Tony Salmelainen. Oh boy. So what a trade. Tony Salmelainen to the Blackhawks for Jaro Spacek and his $2.25 million salary. I honestly think, and then that was a successful kind of early trade deadline trade. I think that's what you kind of have to do again. So I hope so. Defense take longer to settle into teams than forwards do. So if you're going to make that move, I think you make it now rather than later. Will, the final comment on the stream will go to you. How will be an extremely nice homecoming, and putting a guy with great goal-scoring resume like Jeff Skinner next to Connor Bedard is an extremely interesting prospect. And I think that's what you kind of got to sell Jeff Skinner on if you want to. Be like, Jeff, look, it hasn't worked out here. Sorry. That sucks, but like, let's try to find you a place. Connor Bedard's right there. Do you want to go play with him? He rocks. Maybe you have him. You'll have Nick Foligno. You have Alex Vlasic, one of the Vlasics whose first name I can't remember. Like, Chicago's got a lot of good pieces, and they're going to get another really big draft pick. You know, try to sell Jeff on going there and kind of riding out his career in Chicago. Because, like, I think that's what you have to do, really, if you want to move a player like Jeff Skinner for something. I think, though, that is the perfect place to wrap up this little program. The show went a little bit longer than I meant it to. I tried to cap them at a half an hour. This turned into 45 minutes. Hey, I haven't hosted in a little while. I'm just a little guy. I'm doing my best. But that'll close us out here over on Game Over Edmonton. My name's Graham Mosimann. Always love hosting the show. Always love seeing you folks. Janaeus, Will, super rad to see you in the chats. We'll hopefully see you down for the next game as the Oilers' schedule looks as follows. Coming up on Wednesday, Minnesota Wild. That'll be a fun game as the Oilers and Wild go at it at 6:30 from Ice District at Rogers Place. Then Oilers and Avalanche on Thursday, and then the Oilers take a little plane ride over to Vancouver for a meeting against the Canucks coming up at 8 o'clock on Saturday. Have yourself a wonderful evening, friendo. This is a really fun show. Did want to take a moment before we wrap up to say that our thoughts, prayers, and feelings go out to all those affected by the fires in Los Angeles. I'm sure the Kings players have also had a lot on their mind tonight, and it's an unfortunate truth that we didn't really talk about tonight on the show, but you have to imagine that that's something that's wearing on those players, that entire team, and especially that fan base. It's a really shitty, awful situation, and you hope that events like these can be enough to spurn changes on a political and a social level to really focus on the fact that climate change is a big thing, and we're seeing its effects wrap out every single day. So I don't mean to end the show off on too much of a downer note, but if you can help any of those affected by the LA wildfires, I know that would go a very long way, because we've seen it ourselves with Jasper earlier this year, and it's real hard to see it continuing in other places in and around the world, including one of the truly great cities in Los Angeles. If you've never had a chance to visit, it's a real cool one. So very worth a hockey trip for you coming up one day for you in the future. That'll do it for this episode of Game Over Edmonton. I'm Graham Mosimann. We will talk next time here on this little show, a presentation of the Game Over Network. Where's my outro? Where's my button? Oh, there it is.